morning. It's Monday at 7:05 a.m. Oh, let's see. Monday the 4th, I want to say 4th of March. Okay, so I'm working through the book today more, and I'm just going straight through from the beginning and just making some edits on chapters 1 through 11, and then 12 through 18. I'll really have to tweak a little bit. And let's see. So here's how it shakes out. The reason that Moses was able to part the sea, you're like, that's impossible. Actually, it's not. I just have to tell you how to do it. Or Jesus was able to, resurrect. He was resurrected after his death. It's because they followed every coincidence in their life, regardless of whether you think coincidences are total bullshit or they're not, and they're God. They believed. They were like, okay, there's something here, all right? And as they would make a step forward in their journey by following a coincidence, then there would be a coincidence. They would acknowledge it and take the next step forward. And because God actually exists, then he would drop another coincidence in front of them. And you immediately would say, that's bullshit. How do you know that they're actually connected? Because God actually exists, okay, he planned because he knew that they were taking that next step forward. He knew that thousands of years ago, he was able to, direct humanity in a way that allowed for another coincidence to follow it, okay? So it's not like God was just like turning a switch, at the moment that they took their next step forward. He was actually planning it from 2,000 years ago, or however many thousands of years ago, because he could read how much they believed in their mind, okay? That they were going to take that next step forward, that their mind was, sort of connected or adhering to God's system and this system in general. So what happens is they take the next step forward, then there's another coincidence, and the next step forward and another coincidence, and they're like, I don't know where this is leading, because they're not God, but they know that they're not going to stop. Well, what happens is eventually they hit a dead end, and it's not a dead end of like there's no more God and they're wrong. It's a dead end like they can't possibly move forward unless one thing happens, which is Moses is in front of the Red Sea, so it needs to part, or Jesus is at the cross, so he needs to die, right? And they've followed coincidences up to that point. So now it's like a game of chess where they have God in check. And the only way for them to take the next step of their journey would be, in Moses' case, to part the Red Sea. If the Red Sea were able to part, not Moses doing it, but, he needs that thing to open up or he's going to die. Or Jesus gets to the cross, he's like, well, I'm going to have to die. So the only next step is if I get resurrected. And since they believed in this system up to that point, then in the event that the Red Sea didn't part, where Jesus wasn't resurrected, then they'd be able to say with a logical argument, I did all of these things adhering to this system, and because it didn't deliver for me, the Red Sea didn't part or I wasn't resurrected, then there's no God. They would have a logical argument to say God does not exist and this is why. And then they could go for the last seconds or minutes or however long of their life and say, wait, guys, God doesn't exist and I can prove it because this didn't happen. However, because God does exist, he parted the sea, or he resurrected Jesus. You see that? Because God can't be wrong. You can't falsify God. It's like, it's not possible. So my point is that in writing this book, this is like my next step, right? Where it's like, okay, I gotta sit down. It takes me fucking 2 months to write this fucking book. But I know that once it's written, everything from Revelation has been accounted for. I've taken all the next steps and followed each coincidence, and I've listed them all out, and I put them in this book. So once it's published, then the only thing that I have to do next is, I mean, there's plenty of things I have to do, but the next thing to do is to cause natural disasters. I'm not causing them. I'm just taking the next step, which is to reach out to my father, who I quasi rebuilt a relationship with enough to email him and say, okay, there's going to be an earthquake and another earthquake and another earthquake and another earthquake and another earthquake. And if when I email him out of our mouth, which is just our joint platform of recorded conversation, then if they don't happen, then I can say, wait, no, God doesn't exist. Because here's why. I did this, 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 and this. I recorded all of it, and I have a book that shows the whole journey. But because God does exist, if I were to email my dad and nothing happened, then it would prove that he doesn't exist, and I can run around the world saying, oh, no, 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 God, actually, the Abrahamic God does not exist, and here's why. Here's all my proof, and here's everything. But because he does exist, and he will never let that happen, then the next step is boom, earthquake, boom, earthquake, boom, earthquake. Now, I'm not stupid enough to just be like, okay, well, I'm going to email my dad one time and then try to talk to a bunch of people and relate to them. People don't respond to, well, in the stock market, for example. This is a good example. Stocks go up and down. Now, the question is, well, why do they go up? They go up for greed, because of greed, and they go down because of fear, okay? Now, if you look at a stock chart, it always goes up slower. It always goes up slower than it falls. It falls faster. Now, why is that? Because greed isn't as powerful of a motivator as fear. You see that? So I know that if my next step is to cause earthquakes, or to prophecy earthquakes is the right term, because I'm not causing them, I'm just prophesying them. I know that because human beings respond more to fear, that when I prophecy earthquakes, I'm going to prophecy a shitload of earthquakes. You see? And if one of them doesn't work, then God doesn't exist, and then I can just go around the world saying, oh no, God doesn't exist, and here's why. But he can't have that, because then that would be a human being won the game of chess, and not God. You see that? But of course, how did I get to this point? Well, I had to take 2 years. I had to lose everything I had. Over 2 years, actually. Lose everything that I have. I had to make a full-length documentary. I had to humiliate myself, with everyone. I had to scientifically test all the methods from the Bible. Then I had to write it all down. Right? You see? And then I had to publish, or edit and publish a book. And then I can take my next step forward. But until then, it doesn't count. You see that? So that's how Moses parted the Red Sea, and Jesus was resurrected from the dead. And that's how I will be resurrected from the dead after all of these natural disasters just go. People are like, what the fuck? It's because if they didn't, then I could prove that God doesn't exist. But he does exist. Because he exists, it's day of the Lord time, guys. It's checkmate.